how come some countries like mine and so many others in Africa are poor, while others like the US, Australia, New Zealand, all of those guys are rich? People saying it's malnutrition, people saying it's laziness, others saying, oh, it's racism, slavery, colonialism.
Are you against USAID?
Yeah, I am.
You are against sending millions of dollars to Africa.
I call foreign aid poison.
So how do you feel about capitalism?
That's when I finally stopped being a communist. I was a borderline
You were a
communist.
communist?
I was borderline communist. Oh, yeah.
How are they using environmentalism to keep Africa poor?
If you want freedom and flourishing, you need only two ingredients: freedom, and you need abundant, reliable, affordable energy. That's it.
Magatte, I'm going to set the bar very high because you absolutely earned it. People are going to love you. You are so awesome. So let's start with just your background.
So my background, the way I like to explain my background is very much more like from the beginning. I was born in Senegal, the west coast of Africa. And right around when I was age 2, my parents made the very difficult decision that many African parents before them have made and continue making to this day, which was looking at your child in the eyes and realizing that the best thing you can do for her is to leave her. And so my parents left and they became economic migrants to Europe in search for a better life for me.
Who raised you?
My grandma. So when they were gone, my grandma was with me. And then some 5-something years later, like something like that, they decided that the immigration journey had worked. So they called for me to be reunited with them. But being reunited with them meant being separated from my grandmother. And that one was hard because I don't remember, obviously, when my parents left when I was 2, but I very much remember having to leave my grandma when I was 7. So that was a very tragic, moment of my life that to this day, I think I have not, I'm still grieving. But anyway, my parents did what they had to do, and so they first arrived in Germany. And so I was in Germany with them, and I remember arriving in Germany and looking around and just thinking to myself, how come they have this? And really, what I meant at that point primarily was just my shower experience. Back home, grandma would say, Magatte, time for your shower. I knew that I had a good 45 minutes or so to go play around, fool around, not because I was procrastinating, but because I knew that grandma would have to get a stove of coal going, put a pot of water on it, wait for it to boil. Then we put it into a bigger bucket, mix it with cold water for safer temperature. And then somebody stronger than her would have to drag it to the shower area. And there at last, some 45 minutes to an hour later, using a small plastic, cup, transferring back and forth from the big bucket to my body, I could finally take my shower. And here mom says, Magatte, time for your shower. I'm like, where is a bucket of warm water? I am not getting butt naked in this cold weather. It was in the winter. And she's like, oh, come on, you silly. Just jump in the shower. So I jump in there, turn the knobs around. The water is coming down at the temperature that I want, the pressure that you want. And I'm just thinking to myself, I just had this reaction of almost like, wait, this is not normal. This is like a weird case of juju going on. What's the trick? Who's hiding behind? And it was just weird. And so I guess the difference was so stark that if you put it together with the grocery stores where they had more types of breads and more types of apples than my little brain could count, and then the paved roads and all of this, you put it together, I could not help but to be like, how come they have this and we don't? And then that question became literally the defining question of my life. That's the reason why I'm talking to you today.
Since you were a child, you noticed the very stark difference between the two economies.
Yes. I didn't know that it was economies. I didn't know what it was. All I knew was what it meant to my life. I mean, in one place, all of this stuff that has to happen before you take a shower. And here in a few seconds, things are happening. Here you have all of these apples. Back home, you're lucky if you can find even like one. There's only usually one type of apples we could find. And if we find it. And so it was just like, that's weird. Something is going on. And I was just like, how come? How come they have this and we don't? And there was nothing resentful about it. It was just like a very curious question. But it needed to be answered. It needed to be answered because the difference was too striking. It was just too much. And eventually the question became, how come some countries like mine and so many others in Africa are poor, while others like the US, Australia, New Zealand, all of those guys are rich? What's going on? And I went along with my life, trying to, everywhere I could turn, everything I could read, everything I could hear, trying to see if I could get cues to the answer. And of course, I've heard it all. I've heard people starting with the IQ theory saying blacks and browns are just not, as smart. And it shows in the state of, Africa, because it is the home of 90% of the representatives of a black skin color. Most of us live there. And people saying that, people saying it's malnutrition, people saying it's, laziness, others saying, oh, it's racism, slavery, colonialism. I hear all of these things, but at the same time, Marissa, none of them make sense to me. Because I'm thinking to myself, let's just take the colonialism one, that so many people like to, say that's what it is.
Yes.
I say, well, then you have to explain to me how come Ethiopia, which has never been colonized, for the longest time, Ethiopia was the poster child for poverty in Africa. For the longest time, we all grew up. We grew up with jokes of, "Oh, what's a chubby Ethiopian? Oh, it's an Ethiopian showing off." That was the joke, just because to tell you how poor Ethiopia was and emaciated people for the longest time. So this country has never been colonized, yet look at that. Conversely, you have a country like Botswana has been colonized, and for the longest time since the independences, Botswana has been one of the best performers in Africa, economically speaking. So I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't make any sense.
When did you think this to yourself? When did you start realizing?
That was more when I was more older, because for the longest time I believed it was true. But
you believed that
I believe that colonialism had to do with it. I believe that surely, we were colonized. So during all of this time, we were working for free for other people, and they were, taking from us. Yeah, I believed it.
You grew up in Europe, right? In Germany.
Yeah. In Germany, and then after 2 years in Germany, the family moved to France. So France is primarily where I was educated and raised.
And what did they teach you in France about?
Oh. So the French attitude towards this whole part of history is very bizarre. It's a very interesting one, because from the French standpoint, you're getting like a very I call it still a very colonial type of education, where they teach you about all the supposedly good things that slavery has brought. It's not so. Yes, there are parts saying, oh, slavery was not a good thing, and it's a good thing that we moved on from that. But at the same time, it's still veiled with this concept and notions that, this is what the colonizers brought. The roads, in my case, the trains and things like that. And, peace. They claim that the peace was also, established thanks to colonialism. So from that standpoint, we're learning about all the great men and the great women, the great men mostly of France, throughout history. And that's what we learn. We don't really learn from our great men and women from that standpoint.
So in France, were you taught that the French colonization of Senegal ruined Senegal?
No, that's not really what they, at least during my time, because I think now they're changing the curriculum. But during my time, they would just be like maybe some type of agreement that colonialism was not a good thing, but they're not, never are you going to make the connection. No. They're not making that connection of it ruined Senegal. It's people like me and many Africans. And to this day, a majority of Africans, if you line them all up and you ask them why is, making the case for colonialism and its relationship to Africa being poor, most Africans will go there. I mean, there is a reason why my podcast, every time there is, so I had this podcast with Mr. Peterson where he took out a 10-minute excerpt from the interview and he titled it, Africa is not poor because of colonialism. Floodgates of comments, views, millions and millions of views, tens of thousands of comments. It's just, and anytime you would just say it like that, or say colonialism is not the reason why Africa is poor today, you would be flooded by most Africans being very upset about saying that.
People were very upset about what you said on the Jordan Peterson show.
Oh, yes. Very upset.
And is it not true that Senegal is poor because of colonization?
No, for me, it's not. You have to understand, Africa is not poor today because of colonialism. Why?
So why is Senegal poor?
If that was the case, then you explain to me why Singapore today is richer GDP per capita than its colonizer, Great Britain, right? And how many of the Asian tigers have become Asian tigers, and how today a country like Vietnam has also been colonized by France, has been bombed a couple times at least by, and look at Vietnam today, on their way to prosperity, right? So I didn't learn right away what was at play, but I started to question when I had to start actually looking at all of these places, looking at, whether it's Hong Kong, looking at places like Singapore, looking at places nowadays, even like Rwanda has been not only colonized, but they also have gone through a genocide that they got out of in 1994. It's yesterday. And Rwanda is one of the top performers on the continent today. They're on their way as well. So for the rest of the continent to tell me that they're poor because we're poor today because of colonialism, I refute that argument.
So is the reason Senegal is poor or poorer than the West, is it because of corruption?
That's the other thing that they go to then next. And then they're like, so corruption is one that comes up oftentimes, right? So because by now what I have found, if you were to line up 100 people, some Africans, some non-Africans, some non-Africans, some living in the continent, some not living in the continent, you line them all up and you ask them all, why is Africa poor? Everybody, first of all, is going to have an answer for you because everybody has an opinion on this one. I've noticed. Everybody's going to have an opinion. And I have found by now that the opinions can be grouped into two different categories. One group of people, usually these are most of the time Africans, and the people who consider themselves to be African allies, who traditionally have called themselves people on the left for the most part. There, when you ask, it's all reasons related to others. It's because of colonialism. It's because of racism. It's because the West is stealing your natural resources. And those type of answers, I call them all forms of isms. So this is like, it's like somebody else did this to us. Over here, it's usually non-Africans for the most part, and people who are maybe on the fringe of the right, right. And there they would bring up all types of reasons that are basically, when you put them together, they're saying that there's something inherently wrong with Africans, whether it's laziness, whether it's IQ, whether it's you're always fighting each other, all of those things. So you can usually group them. But what those two groups have in common, they also bring bad governance. But I noticed by now that when they say bad governance, most of them mean by bad governments. And what they mean by bad government is a bad leader. And what they mean really by a bad leader is all the corruption. So corruption, of course, comes to the table. And I say to people, let us not be such lazy thinkers. Think deeper. Corruption is a symptom of something.
So what is the left and the right missing about what is happening in Africa right now?
What they're missing is what they get to enjoy, what developed nation, any nation that has developed itself, gets to enjoy, because those are the founding blocks of prosperity. The problem is those are not visible. What is it? When you say corruption to me, corruption for the most part is usually, it's a symptom of something called overregulation. Africa is the most overregulated region in the world. I discovered that as I was doing business. But when I've built 3 companies so far, and they all have in common that I have a sister company in the US, a sister company in Senegal for the most part. And so each one of them is independent from each other, but they're linked somewhere else. And so with the first time I did that exercise, I was shocked, Marissa. It was just so shocking. It took us back then in America to legally register the business less than half a day, because, the internet was not like on yet completely. It was in 2003, 2004 that I started my first company. And so at that point, less than half it in the US. In Senegal, by the time we were done legally registering it, almost 2 years.
2 years to just open a business.
Yeah.
Not even run the business, just to open the business.
To have the legal paperwork and all that stuff. And then you have this issue of labor law, which is still very much there. In Senegal, when I want to hire you, Marissa, I have to get the contract done in three sets, because this is a marriage of three. The marriage is not between you and me like it normally is here. It's between you, me, and the state.
The government gets involved in who you're hiring in your private business?
Yes. And gets to decide how much I get to pay you and all of that stuff. Same thing with whether or not I can fire you when I need to fire you or not, and how much it's going to cost me.
What is it based on?
Oh, it's based on this traditional thinking that, people, especially employees and tenants, need to be protected from the big evil business people and or landlord, those who have the class that
supposedly it's the government that's going to protect
us. Absolutely.
Wow.
Senegalese employees on paper are among the most protected employees in the world. And that word on paper is key. On paper meaning by law. By law. See, the problem is what people see in real life is very different from what is in the laws. And I'll explain why. Because you have this concept of de jure, what the law says, and de facto, what is practiced. Mm-hmm. So imagine now you're in a country where it takes you 2 years to register your business legally. If you want to do it illegally, 2 years to register it. Thousands of dollars associated with those, all the fees you have to, and all the application fees you have to go through. Then when you need to employ somebody, same thing. And this process can take for a long time, by the way, because you get over there and then they tell you, oh, well, we also need a health certificate from the doctor for Marissa that you want to hire to show us that she's physically apt to do the job. Even if it's a desk job, forget it. You have to go back and bring it back. And all of this government office, by the way, is in the capital city. So of Dakar. We happen to be 2 hours away from Dakar. So even though there is a little satellite government office an hour and a half away, still we have to travel. Imagine the people in the middle of nowhere. And it takes a whole day to get there because you get there, the officer, you arrive at 8 a.m. because you want to be the first one and get out. 8 a.m. officer is not here. 9 a.m. not here. 10 a.m. not here. They're running their errands, doing only God knows what, or maybe they're still fooling around with girlfriend number 5. Who knows? Whatever. They're not here. And me, I had to let my business go because if you send your assistant, they won't even care about the assistant because, the assistant doesn't know what else to do, whatever. So they just give her a run around and then she'll come back. And then the next day she has to go again. So here I go because I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for you guys. When you get there, they're pulling out rules and regulations that you're like, I don't know about these. And before coming, my CPA is the one who prepared everything because in this case, you better hire a CPA to get things done the right way. Otherwise, you're going to get them done the wrong way, and which means you'll be
start all over again.
Yeah, and sometimes you do it and you think you did it the right way, but it was not done the right way because when you have too many rules, what happens? Mistakes and too many rules come to, one comes from the other. And
so do people just feel absolute despair? Why would you even want to start a business? It's so expensive and difficult. You have to do all
of these things. Yeah. And then the tax code is worth truckloads of rules and regulations. If you put them all together, you could fill a truck, sometimes multiple trucks with it, depending on which country you're in. That's how complicated everything is. And so you start to imagine it's like swimming through molasses and then the permits and then the licenses and all of that. It's like swimming through molasses, all the way to even the car that you're going to drive, like the little, truck, or even if you use your own car to move like the boxes from point A to point B or going to port. It'll stop you multiple times on a trajectory that's worth 2 hours. You might be stopped, 10 times, 12 times, right? Making you miss out on productivity because time is money. And every time they stop you, some of the silliest thing you hear, Marissa, I stopped you. Why? Why, the officer, did you stop me? Well, I stopped you because you've got tinted windows. Yeah, and so? Well, in order for you to have tinted windows, you have to have a permission from the Minister of Interior. Do you have your permission? No.
Oh my God, I'm not going to lie, but it's starting to sound a little like San Francisco, California.
That's why I left San Francisco, by the way. I was doing business there, and I'm a refugee from San Francisco.
You're like,
to
that
Texas.
looks a lot familiar to me. I think I've seen this in Senegal.
Exactly. But you're making such a good point, Marissa. Absolutely. So my point is, when you make it that there is all of these regulations and all of these laws, each one of those laws and regulations means that the state is expecting you to do something in a certain way or to get something in a certain way.
And creates another barrier to entry for new innovation and then new jobs.
Yes. And when you said barrier, in order then to jump over that barrier, guess what you need to do most of the time?
And that's where the corruption comes from.
That's it. If you had only, instead of having hundreds of reasons why a cop could legitimately stop me in Senegal, and if I don't have my act together, they say, park the car, get out, we're gonna tow it, and you're gonna have to pay for this, and you're gonna have to come to the office and pay us all of this amount of money. If we didn't have 100 of those, but we only had 3, what would happen? Most people would know what the 3 are and never be caught for it. But if you have them all, most people don't even know what most of them are. And chances are, anytime they stop you, it's there. And plus, they add some to them. Some of them are removed. You never know what exactly the law is. It's so obscure. So that's what I mean. So people, when they see that, all you see is that. You don't see the laws. You don't see the regulations. So all you see is a guy stopping you or stopping me and taking the bribe. And so you're saying, this is why it can't work. But so that's why we say, and when I say Africa is overregulated, so I first experienced that through the business, through doing business.
Because you built a business in Senegal, you built a business in the United States, and you just said I was just like Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I was Twilight Zone. But when that happened, my first reaction was, well, I guess it's easy to do business in rich nations because, they're rich. And us, it's hard because we're poor. But the minute you say that, you think to yourself, wait. You're poor because you don't have enough money. You don't have enough money because you don't have a source of income. And what is a source of income for most of us? It's a job, isn't it? Where do jobs come from? It comes from the private sector, from these businesses. Those businesses, do they just happen like this? No. Businesses need an enabling, meaning a business-friendly environment in order to exist and thrive. Yet, but wait, you just told me we had the worst business environments. Voila. There at last, as I was building that company, Marissa, I got my answer. My little girl's question when I was 7 finally got her question answered. Africa is the poorest region in the world because it happens to be the most overregulated region in the world.
So how do you feel about capitalism?
That's when I became the biggest supporter of capitalism. That's when I finally stopped being a communist. I was a borderline
communist. You were a communist?
I was borderline communist. Oh, yeah. And I was very proud of it because I thought this was the best chance for the poor in the world to escape their conditions. I really believed it. But it's in doing this business that it opened my eyes. And so when I started to see this, when I connected those dots of you're poor because, no money, income, businesses.
You're poor because of the government.
Pretty much. It was the most shocking thing in the world to realize in my case. It was so shocking. And so once I discovered that, the funny thing is I started talking to my friends about it. And I was living in San Francisco.
Your communist friends?
Yeah.
In San Francisco?
And I lost 90% of my friends. 90. Yep. They all abandoned me because it was just like, we don't talk like this. We don't believe in these things. And that also was that one though was very painful. It was a very painful moment of my life because it's a moment in my life where things started to really shift. Because my whole life, I had believed that there were good people, bad people. And when I arrived in America, I remember, and when I started paying attention to politics, and by the way, it's funny because I started paying attention to politics only once I arrived in the Bay Area. Because when you're in the Midwest, where I was at first, people are living their lives. These are hardworking Americans, having brick and mortar businesses, very grounded businesses, whether it's a automotive industry, it's a dry cleaning business, it's a some type of manufacturing, like small, medium-sized enterprise, even if it's a bigger one. But grounded
hustling.
people. They're hustling. They're working hard. They're feeding their families. They're raising children. They're God-fearing people. They're just living their lives. And, their politics are not necessarily something that they wear on their sleeves. You don't necessarily know who is what, because that's just not what's there. So when I was in the Midwest, that was just not how things were. There, it's more, we talk more about God. We talk more about, the kids, the families, the futures, the careers, all of those things. That's it. And then when I arrived in the Bay Area, I started noticing, wow, it seems like there is two classes of people. It seems like there is a people on the left and there's people on the right. And then the people on the right is how they think. The people on the left is how they think. That's the first time I actually got to acknowledge all of this, along with becoming very aware that, Magatte, you are African American. Okay, what does that mean anyway? But anyway, I digress. So there in the Bay Area, that's where I was taught, because this was my first time really paying attention to politics. First of all, just by my age, even in France, I wasn't paying attention.
Were you starting a business in the Bay Area?
That's when I was starting. Later, I started my business. But first, I was, a headhunter in finance. So I was not really doing business or anything like that. I was just living my life. Mm-hmm. But it became very clear to me that, people were wearing their political identity on their sleeves, especially the liberals.
Yes, it's a big part of the culture in San Francisco.
Yes, and I've never seen that before. And so as I was becoming introduced to this concept of politics, not that France didn't have politics, but I didn't care. I was living my life, and so as I was being introduced to that, I was in a way grabbed by the other side, who naturally would think that I should be one of them because, hey, I'm the class that they protect, meaning the African American people. And in very certain ways, I was taught about how, Democrats good, Republicans bad. Democrats very tolerant, Republicans racist. But most importantly for me, what it meant was these people are dangerous for you.
They said that Republicans are dangerous.
Yes, the right is dangerous for someone like you.
What was your real experience then?
But it didn't even match with what I went through, because I never knew what my host family in Columbus, Indiana was voting, because, it's just not things that people, again, they don't wear stuff on their sleeves. And so it's not necessarily, so it's just bizarre because back then I didn't know what my host family was. So in my mind, I thought they must have been the good ones too. They're probably liberals. So that's what I thought. And it's only later that I realized everything. So then I run my little life. I'm with my tribe. Supposedly those who care about me. And back then too, they're the ones who care about Africa, all of us. So it's all looking good. It's all looking normal. And it was very clear in my head. This is my side. I'm staying here and this is it. And you guys are bad. Not to be trusted. You hate people. It's all about money, 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 blah, blah, blah. So fine. I live my life like that. But when I started to connect all of these dots, because my whole question again was, why are we poor and others are rich? When I found out why is it that we're poor and others are rich, and I brought this to my friends, to my community, and they rejected me for that. That's when I had to sit down and really rethink this and be like, this is strange, because you're the people who said you always cared about me. And yet here we are. And because it turns out that what I need is a free market, because back then, now I know all of these things, because I had gone into a rabbit hole of economics, learning from people I've never heard before. I was just like, New York Times was everything, whatever. So I just had to go through a reckoning of my mind and open myself to a whole new world, understand the world of Hayek, of people like Friedman, all of those people, and just, wow, Thomas Sowell. Just be like, oh, really? But the truth is, everything that they were about made more sense to me because I've lived it. So I've seen both sides, and now I can compare.
So you really saw the government is not the solution. The government is the problem.
It's the problem. Government is a problem. So when I saw that, my friends rejected me. And so I had to question their motivation. And that's when I came away feeling and realizing, you don't care about me. You've been using me all of this time as a pawn for your narrative, for your rhetoric. So us Black people and African people, we matter as long as we can help you frame, your narrative. So as long as I'm willing to go with your narrative of I'm poor because we're colonized, I'm poor because of racism, I'm poor, all of these isms that are really robbing me of my agency. what I discovered later is you have plenty of people on the right who are decent, amazing people doing God's work every day that God makes, and you never hear them telling it's not about we care, it's not about me, and the virtue signaling. They are doing what they're doing because that's the right thing to do, and that's it. There's no need for screaming it out loud. The other side over there, though, screams out loud. It's just all a tag that they put on their backs. So they say, we are the ones who care about you, not them. We care about you. And then, by the way, what they teach you is, you're where you are. You're not getting what you want because of racism. You're not getting what you want because people are deliberately standing in your way. Because again, it goes back to race, or goes back to your sex, or goes back to your orientation. Whatever it is, they'll just say that is a reason why you're not having there's inequality between you and these other people. And on the other side, what you have is the class of folks that they think is not doing too well. Maybe the Black people, Latino people, women, you name it. That's how it works. So in Africa, you have the liberals who are, whether they're in Africa or here, they're looking at the situation of Africa being the poorest region in the world, and they're thinking to themselves, gee, look at that. Isn't that horrible? What should we do? Let's send them aid.
I want to ask you about that. Aid. How do you feel about U.S. aid? Because millions and millions of dollars have been sent to Africa. So are you against U.S. aid?
Yeah, I am.
You are against sending millions of dollars to Africa.
Trillions.
Trillions.
By the time all of this is counted, since the end of colonialism, the money that has been sent home is in the trillions. It's a lot of money that has been sent. And what do we have to show for today in 2025? Almost nothing.
Why do you think financial aid to Africa is hurting Africa?
Think about if somebody was on welfare. And that's what I'm saying. It's the same people connecting with the same other people doing the same thing. So for us in Africa, follow me. Africa is the poorest region in the world. They who say they care about us say, okay, how do we solve this problem? Let's send them aid. Same people here in America, if they look at the Blacks that are not doing too well, and I'm not saying not all Blacks are not doing too well, there are millions of African Americans who are doing perfectly well, and God bless them, may they continue on that path. But the Blacks who are not doing too well, these same people who say, we care about you, Black person, therefore, welfare for you. In Africa, Black people get aid. In America, Black people get welfare. In the situation I'm explaining. Who has ever made it constantly on aid or being constantly on welfare? You tell me. Who? Now, on the welfare situation, isn't it true that any civilized society should be able to take care of its people, members of their society, when they're down on their luck? I think we should. But the issue is, for the longest time, that when one of us is down on our luck, everybody else needs to rally and support you. But it's meant to be a temporary type of intervention. It's just a matter of helping you get back on the saddle, right? And then you go on your own. That's what it's normally supposed to be. But when aid becomes chronic, we have a problem. When welfare becomes chronic, we have a problem. And that's exactly what has been happening. And the reason why it has become chronic is because a whole industry has been creating around itself.
An industry of financial aid that prevents people from actually wanting to work and have self-efficacy.
It's on both sides. It's on both sides. So if you were to see the documentary called Poverty, Inc., this year is its 10th year. That's why we've been saying this to people for more than a decade. In my case, more than a decade. The movie came out 10 years ago. So Poverty, Inc. shows you how this system works. Basically, all of this money we're talking about that has gone into aid, the global aid industry, basically most of it, the way to think about it, the way to follow that money is a big chunk of it. A big chunk of it goes straight back to the nations that gave it. It goes to the consultants that work in the industry. It goes back to all of these people that work at USAID. You know, those of them who are based in my country, They make insane amounts of money. Our taxpayer money, pays for their inflated salaries, pays for their housing, pays for them to be able to come back home at least once a year, the whole family trip paid by us. Oftentimes, it's in business class. In these African nations, they get to have maids, drivers, cooks, all of that stuff, paid by you and I, living lives that they could never dream to live if they were living here in the United States. So that's how they live. Meanwhile, the poor African, that's the whole reason why they're there, gets the little crumbs. So a lot of the money goes back straight to where it came from through that methodology, through that process. And another chunk of the money goes into the pockets of our leaders. So the leaders are getting some. The donor nations are getting most of it back.
You got to wonder whether those leaders are incentivized to keep people poor, because as long as they're poor, they can keep getting the USA.
That's where I'm going.
Western aid.
That's where I'm going. So when you have a system like that, what happens? A system where if the poor, for whom it's intended to get out of poverty, are no longer poor, everything, it's done. Game over. So what have you done? You've created an incentive where the leaders, yes, are not incentivized for this poverty to go away. And the USAID people, all of these workers, that whole industry, no incentives for this to go away.
Wow.
Lives are built on this. Careers are built on this. And on top of that, especially for the USAID people, they get to walk around feeling superior to everybody else because, we work with poverty, we're supporting these people, we're better than you dirty business person making money. That's how they see it.
Wow.
So us in Africa, we see this. You don't.
Yeah.
Because you're not there. But we see it. We see the big SUVs. They don't pay for the gas, even that they put in it. At restaurants all the time, having fancy parties. We have also many places where they don't even want to mix with the locals. They don't. They come, supposedly they're working with us and trying to help us, supposedly.
Virtue signaling.
And then I have this friend of mine, he wanted to be, so they have this little WhatsApp group, the expats, because there they call them expats. See, when we come to your country, we're called migrants. When they go to our country, we're called expats. You see it. So anyway, so in this case, for example, this friend of mine who's Senegalese black man, somebody who didn't know the codes, wanted to invite him to the volleyball team made only of expats. Did you know that they didn't want him in?
Wow.
They don't mix with us. They have their little lives and they live in little compounds and they all know each other. And that's pretty much what it is. So because you're thousands of miles away, you don't see the reality. But we Africans have seen this. We've known this forever. And we've been trying to raise the alarm, but nobody has been listening. Nobody. But so then for this aid, this money you send to us, you created very sick incentives for my leader to never want to do what needs to be done so we can build the wealth ourselves. Thank you very much. All of these aid people are just that. They're there because it's an industry. And me, on top of that, what this whole thing is doing is creating a culture of dependency. It's creating a culture that's the opposite of what's needed for entrepreneurship to happen.
Wow.
And so
devastating.
It's devastating. And you can understand then why I call aid, foreign aid, I call it poison. Poison. And I make the difference, and I ask people to make the differentiation between humanitarian aid and foreign aid. That's a very key differentiation to make. And that's the one thing I would probably have done differently if I was President Trump and the Doge people on this case. I would have told them, kick to the curb probably 80 to 90% of all of his aid. Stop it all. Stop it all. Dambisa Moyo has been saying it also with her book, Dead Aid. Amazing book. And stop it all. But then the ones that we know it's more or less humanitarian aid, like some people rely on this pill to stay alive. Some kids rely on this, bag of food to stay alive. Those, keep them, but keep them with a caveat. We're going to put a 5 or 10-year or maybe even shorter plan on it. We need to think about how are we going to get out of here? How are we going to make sure that 5 years from now, yes, there need to be a sunset clause, something like that, so that within a few years, we know that these people won't need us anymore.
You know, Magatte, you mentioned isms, all these religions that have been created in order to virtue signal. What are your thoughts about environmentalism and energy in Africa? Because that is another massive conversation that's being had.
It's another one. Thank you very much. And it's again the same characters,
Same people.
the same characters in the movie.
Yes.
Same characters in the movie. Again, those who care. And by the way, you know when they started to care about environmentalism?
When?
Is when it became clear that the free markets was the way out for poverty.
Explain.
The ideologies that run in these circles are very anti-market, very anti-business, very pro-government. Right?
They want big government.
They want big
power.
government. They want big power. So that doesn't go well together with what entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship needs and the free markets. It's just like this. So for as long as the story could remain that Africa is poor because of colonialism and all types of reasons that are not related to, and we don't even talk about the free markets. We don't talk about the role. They were fine. It was, as long as supposedly Africa was poor due to
things from the past that you can't change.
That, and also capitalism. Because I was also trained to believe what you're seeing in Africa is what happens because of capitalism. And because people in their mind, even the natural resource grab that they're seeing, for them, it's capitalism that's doing that. And I'm like, no, that's crony. That's crony. What you're seeing over there is crony. Yeah. Is business, yes, coming, but playing with the power that somebody was given because he's part of government, putting those two together and saying, hey, give me access to this how much I'm going to pay, you take a piece of it, take it home, but that's crony. That's not business. But people see things like this, or they see that the only few businesses that can be big in Africa, for the most part, like telecommunications or whatever, they see all the cronyism going on. But because they haven't really gotten a chance to see, like, normal business happening where you don't have to know people to make it, they're thinking, see, this is what we know of business. These are the businesses we see. But what do we see? We see that most of them, they need the government in order to make it. And so they're saying, but for them, that what they're witnessing over there in their brain, they call it capitalism. You and I know it's crony.
How are they using environmentalism to keep Africa poor and then continue to have all that power?
Yeah. So when it became clear that free markets was the solution to poverty, there was just no argument back on their end. They had to flee those premises. And the next thing that they came up with was the environment. And there it's a tricky one because people see, climate change is changing, things are happening, there are stuff happening. So on this part here, the same people again, we care about Africa, we care about Earth. They're saying, well, then we need to protect the environment. And again, just like when they were saying to protect us people, government is the best one to do that. Here, government is also going to be the best one to protect the environment through rules, regulations, all, things of that nature. In our case, we look around and we're asking, okay, so what's the plan? What's your plan? Because it's their plan. And they say, well, at first it was net zero by 2030, then 2035, now by 2050, who knows? Anybody who knows anything about life and everything we've been able to build knows that without energy, without access to affordable, abundant, reliable, and those three together, energy, viable energy is not just affordable energy. It has to be affordable and reliable and abundant.
And so Africa remains poor because it has no access to energy. But meanwhile, we have this environmentalism religion that is keeping Africans poor.
That's right. So, but
why are they doing that?
And the irony of this...
Why would the leadership of Senegal or Africa allow for this to happen?
The same reason they allowed for foreign aid to be the only relationship that we could have with the West, because they get paid. So right now they tell us, don't use fossil fuels, and we will compensate you with more aid. And it's called climate aid.
Mm-hmm. Climate
It's
aid.
climate aid. It's climate aid now. So it's like forego using any of this stuff, and we will give you more money.
Don't become independent. Don't build your own industry. Remain dependent on us, and we will pay for it.
Yes. The noise has been happening. Some of us have been, like I said, talking, and it's been harder and harder for our governments to kind of take this foreign aid, to be honest, because the foreign aid, some of us have been working so that it becomes conditioned on our governments putting the right conditions for entrepreneurship to happen.
Yes.
So it was getting harder.
It's like ESG. We have that in the United States, environmental.
Yeah. That's on the environmental side. But so in this case, what you have is the same play again. I told you, it's the same movie playing again. Same actors, using the same playbook, using different things. And so in this case, our leaders are just like, hey, one more chateau in the south of France, one more Swiss bank account. There was foreign aid, and now there's going to be climate aid. It's just one more check.
Do you believe that they know? Do you believe that they know that having more access to the leadership in Africa, do they know that having access to more energy in the solution is fossil fuels and not renewables? And they're not doing it because they want their chateau in France?
We will talk about the trick that's in there. Our leaders are not idiots. Our leaders know a lot, Marissa. We're seeing it very much, for example, with Kenya, where Ruto is out there telling people, "Oh yeah, we're gonna be no fossil fuels at all," and he has this very small amount of years that he's putting it on, something ridiculous, something non-feasible. But he's out there telling them that he gets the money. So my point is, how else could you do? Because think about it, you have an economy where half or something like that of your budget, if it's not more sometimes, of your national budget comes from foreign aid. You don't have the money to be able to build your own pipelines. You're going to need investments from the outside world. But what this investment is subject to what the West is deciding. So all the way from Tokyo, London, Paris, Washington, D.C., this global cabal had gotten together and said, no more fossil fuels. And then that's going back to what you were saying, they put in place ESG rules.
How is China getting involved in all of the natural resources in Africa now?
That's where China, so now, while the West is making all of these mandates and imposing it upon us, that's the other reason why our leaders are doing it. And you think they don't know because who in their right mind would accept this? Such a stupid deal. It's only people who are dependent. We are dependent. African nations are dependent on the West. Why? Because as long as we remain poor, we will be dependent on you.
So it's by design. But China now is taking advantage.
And China, looking at China, the West says whatever they want to say. But the Chinese could care less, because the Chinese don't need the West to build a coal plant, to build, fossil fuel infrastructure related, nothing like that. And then they're saying, whatever, we're gonna do these things because we know that we have to use any energy that's available to us, affordable, abundant, reliable. Anywhere we find it, we're going to use it. And so they're building coal plants faster than anybody can say their name, having access to anything they can. And the Chinese also, this is where I'm saying to the Americans and to the West, here you are saying that you are in a war with China, right? Economic war with China. And you're shooting yourself in the foot, because the more you're going to try to tell us not to use our fossil fuels, not all of our presidents are crazy or willing to just go with the vibes. So what's going to happen is the more you're going to try to block us from having access to our fossil fuels, some of us are going to start to look east. And so what you're doing is you're pushing us into the arms of China, because at least the Chinese are not patronizing us about what type of energy mix can we use or not, And the Indians are also doing the same thing. India is just like, whatever, West, you say whatever, you want to commit suicide, economic suicide with these stupid rules of yours, you go right ahead. We don't have to listen to you, because we can also finance our own infrastructure when it comes to energy and our energy mix. So China and India, because they're not dependent on the West, are able to do whatever they need to do for their energy needs. We Africans are less able to do that because of our dependency. And a lot of our dependency also was coming from this foreign aid. Even though the regular Africans don't touch much of it. But as long as our leaders felt like they could put their pockets in there, that's how it is.
And so China is taking advantage of this vacuum that's been
Absolutely.
created in the market.
Absolutely. And so this is why they've been taking it for a long time. But you see, where the Chinese have been winning with Africans compared to the West is in a few ways. But the biggest way is when the Chinese come to our nations, they don't play judge. So what I mean by that is China is willing to do business with pretty much anybody. So the Chinese would come and say, we're going to loan you the money. You want to build a road? Yeah. How much? The road's going to cost $1 million. I'm just making it up. Of course, it doesn't cost $1 million, more than that. Cost $1 million. Okay. We will loan you $1 million for this road and you will let us build it.
Yeah.
So you see, there's no cash really moving around that these guys, of course, they're gonna line their pockets a little bit, but it's not gonna be in the most direct way. And also they can't pocket that much. So the Chinese in a way they have been smarter than the West. The West was just throwing this foreign
We play
aid cash.
checkers and they play Chinese checkers.
Exactly.
What do you think the West should do now with Africa?
Yeah. So especially now I do think that USAID being gone is a good thing for the most. It's a good thing.
It's the most shocking thing I would ever hear.
I've always said that. We don't want aid. I'm known for that. I've always been, we don't want aid, but out, because aid is a crutch. It's a crutch that doesn't work. It causes more troubles than it's worth. I argue, Marissa, that this foreign aid from the West has literally delayed our economic development. More than colonialism, I blame aid. If I had to blame something or somebody, I would be blaming foreign aid.
Do you think we should invest in
that's where we're going.
Those cities?
That's where, yes, exactly. So foreign aid has delayed us by masking and bailing out our governments too often for too long from doing what they needed to do. What we need to do is, if you ask me for my human flourishing recipe, for me, if you want human flourishing, you need only 2 ingredients and nothing else. You need freedom, especially economic freedom, and you need abundant, reliable, affordable energy. That's it. If those 2 are there, everything else takes care of itself. But when you take a look at those 2 ingredients, those are the ones Africa has been sorely missing, and where the West has been messing with us too badly. Because on the economic freedom, instead of letting us, having to figure it out and say, no money for you, we can maybe do like the Chinese and help you with road and stuff like that. But that can only go so far. Because at some point, local entrepreneurs are going to have to build local businesses and grow the economy. But for that to happen, economic freedom has to be there. So we have been delayed in that process with this stupid foreign aid. And then when you talk about energy, now the climate alarmists, crazy, anti-fossil fuel zealots are now coming into the scene and saying, oh, that second ingredient too? Guess what? Even though we used all of it in order to get to where we are. Which is a proof that that's what it takes. So what I tell the Americans is, good that we remove the aid. I just believe that we could handle the pure humanitarian side better, where we just don't let people die on hospital beds. And again, I believe that's only a tiny portion of it. We should have found a way to carve those out, but put a sunset clause on it, have it end eventually within a few years, have a plan to get out of people needing us for the HIV medication or, feeding kids, because kids needing to be fed is nothing else than a cause of poverty. You fix the poverty, they're not going to need that anymore from you. But right now, if somebody needs to be fed right now so they don't die, drop dead now, we feed them and we talk later. I get that. So that's the only thing I would have done differently. But for the most part, this aid needed to go. And it was not even a day sooner that it needed to go. So we did that. So now what do we need to do? This is where I think there is an amazing opportunity for America to really, really get to the next level. So if the recipe is going to be economic freedom and energy, then what we have come up with is this concept of startup cities.
Yeah, what are startup cities?
Startup cities are next generation special economic zones that have their own law, have their own governance. The best way to think about these is that it's basically these are zones that are running on a platform that's the platform is based on common law, because that's the very best for economic development.
Is there common law in Senegal?
My country, sadly, doesn't have it because as the Francophone African nations, when France left, part of the deal was the ex-colonies would still be using civil law, which is just dreadful. And so Senegal doesn't have it, but we're hoping that they're going to do exactly what countries like Dubai, but
these startup cities within Africa would be sovereign enough to be able to have common law separate from the government?
Yeah. So the way I wouldn't use the word sovereign, because then that makes it sound like there's two countries into one.
Yeah.
But the best way to think about them is think about what Dubai did. Dubai, so the city of Dubai, basically looking around when it was just like a little fisherman's village, lost in the middle of nowhere with nothing. And Dubai, especially for the international financial center, they looked around the world and they're noticing that the best ones around the world are based on British common law. So they started having their plans together and saying, we're going to have to do something similar. So here's Dubai running on Sharia law and saying the rest of the country can run on Sharia law if it wants to, but these 110 acres of land we're going to put aside for this project is going to have to run on the best type of law that the world has seen and has to offer. And it is British common law. You like it or you don't like it, damn it, that's what we're going to do. And they pushed it even further and they looked around and were like, we don't have anybody in this country that can handle that, knows how to do it. Our judges don't know how this works, whatever. So pride aside, let us go hire retired British common law judges, bring them over here so they can adjudicate the law. So see, if you think of Dubai now, you start to see how it makes sense. It's a zone that works very differently from the rest of the country, but it doesn't have to be, like there is no split of sovereignty. It's just saying that we know that poverty is solved by prosperity. Prosperity is built by entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs need an enabling business environment. And we know that the best business environments run on common law. On common law. So these zones are on a foundation of common law, running on an e-system rails, like, in Estonia. They have their own choice of law, and they also have choice of regulatory, so that you get to not have a regulatory be captured. And so in doing it this way, you're now able to put in place in these African nations that traditionally have the worst business environments in the world. Through these zones, you bring them world-class business environment. If any of these cities was its own country and you looked at them on doing business index rankings, various ones, they would systematically be in the top 10, up there with Singapore, Hong Kong, Denmark, places like that. That's what we're doing. And so here we're telling the US, come with us, make these type of cities your foreign policy. And the beauty of these things is that in doing this, you are sending the strong signal to Africans. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. The environment is what's wrong. Because in the US, and I think the Americans are seeing it now, the reason why you hear them screaming about overregulation is because it is true. More and more regulations have been coming to the table, and entrepreneurs and business people are feeling the choking now. And so it is no mistake. If you put all the business creators of America and you put them, for example, in my country will remain the same. Because those people could not have accomplished what they're accomplishing.
Suffocated.
Exactly. And so by doing this, by supporting these type of places and making it part of its foreign policy and saying, we're going to support these places, we're going to, they're sending the signal to Africans, nothing is wrong with you. It's the business environment and we're going to fix it. It's not about your culture. It's not, because we don't touch family law. We don't touch immigration law. We don't touch defense law, anything like that, because that's the privy of a sovereign nation. But when it comes to business, in the US already you see it. When you're in California, It's not the same as doing business in Texas.
Yeah.
It's not the same as doing business in Idaho or whatever it is. So these zones, so as you see and also when you're in the U.S., you're in a state, you have from county to county things vary. So it is normal. It's well accepted around the world that we can play with the business environment. It's a matter of designing the best one. So here, that's what we're doing. So the Americans would be saying, Africans, we know there's nothing wrong with you. This business environment is where the problem is. Let us help level the playing field. It is not about aid. It is not about handouts. It's just about supporting in leveling the playing field. And also when it comes to the energy in these zones, no one is going to tell you what to do. This is going to be, you decide what you need, and we're going to support it. Investment for, if it's nuclear, whatever, we can do it with you. So my point is, and when as Americans do this is one of the deals where Americans will be able to work hand in hand with ordinary Africans as well. Because right now, the way the world works, if you think about it, Europe, and especially the French in Francophone Africa, their deals with us is, dear leader, I'm going to protect you, your geographical zone. I'm going to protect the integrity of your geographical, country. So meaning literally, militaries come in. We're going to protect you because you don't, So in exchange, you will, pay me with your natural resources, and also my multinationals get first dab for pretty much anything. Okay, great. In a deal like that, the ordinary African is not really. Even though you might say, hey, we're protecting your borders, you're at peace because, nothing is happening. They might be like, well, but I'm still poor.
Right.
Okay. So then the Russians show up, and the Russians say, dear leader, I'm going to protect you from your own people. In this case, we're talking your military, your police, so they don't do a coup on you because you're so lousy. And in exchange, you'll give me your natural resources and all of that. In a deal like that, the ordinary African is like, I'm still poor.
Yeah.
Chinese come and say, dear leader, we're going to bail you out on the roads, airports, and hospitals you were supposed to build. And in a deal like that, yeah, you can say the ordinary African might see, like a better road, a better airport, and a better hospital, but we're still poor. And we're still poor because the problem has still not been addressed. And the problem is economic freedom and energy. And so here, if you have, for the first time, a partner who says it is about economic freedom, it is about energy, and if we support at that level, everything else happens. My God. So this is where all of a sudden the ordinary Africans are going to be in this place where they can build their businesses, where they can build their schools, they can do everything that they need to do. And in their bones, they would have understood and lived the promise of the free markets, and lived the promise of capitalism, and lived the promise of what energy does, all of that. And now, not only do you have amazing trade partners that you developed, but on top of that, you also have philosophically aligned partners, people who are going to be promoting, a culture of liberty and freedom, rather than thinking a strong man or a strong woman is the solution and all of that stuff. So this is how all of a sudden you would have created 2.5 billion friends by 2050. And if that is not being, if we don't do this, if Americans don't wake up to this, by 2050, you're going to have 2.5 billion Africans who are literally thinking that the way of being and doing is more the Chinese and the Russian way.
Wow.
Whatever one might think of that. So that's what I'm saying to Americans. There's an amazing opportunity here. Africa is open for business. We are open for business. But no one wants to be told what to do. No one wants to be given handouts.
You're sick of being a
We're
victim.
sick of being a victim. And so show up, be a partner. And we're not asking anything of you. All of the stuff I'm talking about here requires $0 from the American taxpayer.
The opposite of dollars.
The opposite. So let us be smart and let us play the long game as well. There are 2.5 billion Africans looking for nothing more than equal partners and people to call allies and friends in this world as we move forward, because nobody can do it alone. I believe if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So this is what's on the table, guys. USAID out. and startup cities, Prospera, we call them Prospera cities because it's all about prosperity. And then from there, we can tackle anything we pretty much need. So we don't need the climate activists, we don't need the climate aid, and we don't need the foreign aid. All we need is these startup cities, these Prospera cities, where we are able to also build wealth for ourselves, but also for our American partners and anybody who's going to be willing to partner with us. And I think it's a much better story. And it's a story of also healing for everybody and accelerating and pushing the human race forward. So I think it's one of the most beautiful things. I know that many people are getting scared right now. They look at the USAID and some people are like, oh my God, what are we going to do? But sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you need to get a little bit worse before we can get better. And this was long due. And it's a beautiful world. The future is very bright. I'm very excited for
I
us.
love that you're optimistic.
Yeah.
Magatte with the heart of a cheetah.
Yes.
I'm sure people are going to want to follow you and read your book. And honestly, just really appreciate your brave message. So you're really an inspiration.
Thank you so much, Marissa.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.